Landscapes of bewitching beauty. Unique. Species-rich. Exemplary. Because something extraordinary is happening here. These natural habitats remain intact only because humans intervene and shape them. A new pact with nature. Lake Constance is one of the biggest lakes of Central Europe, the heart of a region which has been shaped by mankind for thousands of years. But this orderly landscape also has a darker side. Intensive farming is massively encroaching on nature. Because these cultivated areas no longer provide them with enough food, birds are disappearing. But committed individuals are showing that it's possible to find a way out of this calamity. With ideas that are both ingenious and simple, and that create space for new life. How can habitats long disappeared be revived? It's a spectacular setting. The foothills of the Alps, south of Lake Constance. Meltwater and rainwater from the mountains feed the Rhine and Lake Constance as well with fresh water. On sunny slopes grow the grapes of world-renowned wines, and apples have been harvested here for at least 1,300 years. Hops are exported as far as the US. There's a man living in this region who for decades has been closely observing the impact of this intensive agriculture. Peter Berthold is an ornithologist whose knowledge of the bird life of Central Europe is second to none. For years, he's been examining in depth the mysteries of bird migration. His research work has made him famous. Now over 80, he's focusing on indigenous birds like the Eurasian reed warbler. In his outdoor laboratory, he can form a picture of the current state of the bird life. Peter Berthold tags every bird that's caught with a ring, so it can be identified later anywhere in the world. But in recent years, he's been seeing and hearing many of these creatures increasingly rarely.
I usually start to orientate my ears while I'm still lying in bed. If a brown owl calls at 1 in the morning, I wake up and listen. And if the first cuckoo in spring calls at 2 in the morning, I hear it. And if, once every 25 years, a corncrake calls from the meadow at 3 in the morning, I spring out of bed.
Not just the corncrake. Other birds are also appearing less and less often. When he listens to the various calls of birds in his wild garden, he can hear that it's become a lot quieter. Peter Berthold can depend absolutely on his trained ear.
Oh, that's a relatively rare bird. A bullfinch. We have very few of them now. Many species are missing. About now, in the linden tree, we should be hearing a spotted flycatcher, for example. But it's years since we've heard one. They've become so rare that they actually don't come back here anymore, just very occasionally.
However hard he listens, spring has become less rich in birdsong. The conclusion that he draws as professor and former head of the renowned Max Planck Institute for Ornithology is alarming. In Germany alone, between 1950 and 2015, the number of birds fell by 65%. This young starling is only here because Peter Berthold supports his birds with nesting boxes. What's happened in the last 70 years? Why have the birds disappeared from a landscape that at first sight looks so lush, green and healthy? Peter Berthold looks at his home with different eyes. He sees what's missing here for the birds. Greenhouses protect fruit and vegetables, but they seal off the meadows. There's no room here for wild herbs, grasses and flowers, where birds find their food. Around half of the state of Baden-Württemberg is agricultural land, subject to spraying, ploughing and manuring.
Bird numbers are declining overall because of habitat loss. In the past, an agricultural landscape like this had potato fields, cornfields and so on, with proper hedgerows between them. It was land that could be farmed well, but where everything else could also live its life. There were hares and partridges and lapwings and yellowhammers and so on. There was food for all.
Those times are long gone. So, over 15 years ago, Peter Berthold set himself a bold challenge, creating a new natural habitat to give back to birds and other wild creatures what's been taken from them. His plan needed suitable meadowland, and suddenly there were farmers and communities ready to help him find it.
If we could then turn the meadow into a biotope, we could set up a new home for wild animals and plants. That was the idea, and we tried it.
In 2004, the diggers moved into a 10-hectare meadow in Peter Berthold's home community of Billefingen. The start of an experiment that was to change the whole region. They created a large pond with a reed belt and 3 islands. The transformation cost 300,000 euros, paid for by a donor, who, like Peter Berthold, hoped to give nature a second chance. The donor was the late German wildlife filmmaker Heinz Sielmann and his Nature Conservation Foundation.
We're still benefiting from it today. We're still getting fresh additions, new dragonflies, amphibians, birds, and so on.
The oasis soon became a new home for insects. And for the larvae and worms that these common snipe had long been looking for in vain. Grey-lag geese have also discovered this little gem on their transit route, as has the mute swan that finds water plants, algae, worms and snails here, everything it needs to live. Some rare species, which in part had completely disappeared from the region, have also returned. The nightingale, the great reed warbler, and the marsh warbler. In the animal world, words got round that there's food down at Heinz Sielmann's pond.
In the autumn, the swallows migrate and race over the countryside desperately looking for insects. Then they arrive at the Heinz Sielmann pond and suddenly find clouds of all sorts of midges, moths, gnats and so on, and stop here. On some days, we've had 3,000 swallows over the pond, then overnighting in the reeds and moving on the next day, no doubt thinking, wow, that was the best we've found flying over Germany.
But a biotope like this needs maintenance if it's to meet the varied needs of its visitors. Peter Berthold has been able to recruit 4-legged helpers. The wild water buffaloes of a local farmer keep down the grass on the swampy meadows. This pioneering project shows that areas like this can even be farmed and still be species-rich. But one single mini biotope can't bring the birds back to the whole region. At Affenberg, an animal park in Salem, conservationists have been inspired by Berthold's vision. Flapping through the air here are flying giants with a wingspan of over 2 meters. The white stork had almost completely died out here. A number of breeding pairs were specially introduced at Affenberg. In the meantime, the colony has grown to around 350 storks again. For the storks, it's an eventful day. Roland Hilgartner, the director of the animal park, and his colleagues are going to ring the young storks.
We begin this year with the 2 young storks from the Florian nest, with number AY293. They're the first 2 this year, about 5 weeks old.
Great, looking forward to it.
Me too.
The young storks have some cold and wet weeks behind them. From an average of 4 eggs per nest, often only 2 chicks survive the first weeks of life. As soon as the platform approaches, the timid stork parents withdraw. The chicks can't yet flee, so they react to people with an instinctive trick. They simply play dead. The 2 show no movement, but they're perfectly healthy. This apparent death, as it's known, protects them against nest predators like cats and martins, which react to movement. Down below, spectators are waiting for a special show.
I'm going to give out the food. It's dead, male day-old chicks from large poultry farms. I also have smelts, which are little fish.
A stork family needs at least 3 kilograms of fresh meat a day. But nature has long since stopped providing so much food in this region. The storks are not long in coming. Without this food, they would starve to death. Here too, nature needs a helping hand.
You could get the impression here that all's well with the world. But without the feeding or the reintroduction program, there'd be no storks here. And we make it clear that further efforts are needed to establish a self-sustaining stork population again here in Baden-Württemberg.
Other birds, too, can't find adequate quantities of natural nutrition in the area around Peter Berthold's garden. A single pond falls far short of providing all the birds here with the basic necessities. As long as the region's birds continue to suffer from hunger, Peter Berthold relies on first aid measures. The mealworms he gives the birds in his garden are homegrown. Like the storks, starlings also have to struggle in spring to support their young. Loaded up now, it's back to the nest. As a bird expert, Peter Berthold knows it's no problem to provide hungry birds with grain and nuts throughout the year. But feeding them is not the answer. For years, Peter Berthold has been looking for more locations for creating small paradises for birds. And he's increasingly finding support among kindred spirits. Martin Kessler is one of them. With his small association, he's campaigning for the preservation of more natural orchards. Peter Berthold and the Zielmann Foundation are supporting traditional fruit farming. With financial support from the foundation, Martin Kessler has been able to plant new sorts of tall fruit trees, with crowns allowed to grow freely. In the standard monocultures, small trees grow compactly together to facilitate machine harvesting. Meadow orchards are very different. They provide a biotope with ample food for birds and other wild animals. When the fruit trees burst into blossom, visitors swarm in. The Eurasian blue tit eats flower seeds, thereby dispersing them. The European green woodpecker finds good nesting places. The common kestrel finds an oasis like this an excellent hunting ground. Over the summer, the blossoms turn into fruit, and many wild animals benefit from fruit that's not harvested. The favorite food of the Eurasian nuthatch in autumn is the kernels from scattered nut trees. It uses bark crevices as nutcrackers. The common vole also knows that a traditional orchard, like Martin Kessler's in Hödingen, has a lot to offer.
Hödingen is among the best we have in southern Germany, certainly here around the fantastic Lake Constance. We have a relatively complete belt of traditional orchard, and above all, we have a population that is completely behind it and can work with it.
Martin Kessler administers a real treasure. Not only are many old varieties of fruit looked after here, but an astounding 5,000 or so animal and plant species.
With today's heightened awareness, we can say, hey, we live in a really great God-given landscape, and it's worth investing time on its behalf. The Zielman Foundation certainly did much to bring us back to this consciousness.
Ponds and meadow orchards are small islands of life in a cultivated landscape that's otherwise hostile to wildlife. Peter Berthold wants to go even further. He's campaigning in the whole region for new biotopes to be set up in order to create a network.
There can be no going back. We have to get to work and grab a spade. Then we can help a whole load of birds, at least half the bird life we still have. And the same goes for amphibians, insects and plants. These biotopes are enormously beneficial.
A lot of people around Lake Constance have responded to his call. Families with private land are turning to him. The biologist is here to see if this large garden can provide another valuable oasis. At the back of the land, there's a surprise, an overgrown mill pond.
Shining pondweed at the front. That's very good.
The group makes its way through dense undergrowth. Peter quickly recognizes the potential of the land, as well as its drawbacks. The pond has degenerated into a sludge pit. The stream could provide it with fresh water again. The toads are happy here, but a properly laid out biotope could attract far more species. The professor immediately has an idea of what could be done.
Three-quarters of it could be a pond and the rest a sludge trap. That'd be great.
Newly laid out troughs of shallow water and flowering wetland areas could soon produce a habitat here like the one at the Heinz Zielman pond. But that takes practical help from experts.
We were a bit overstretched in a way with the care and maintenance and wanted to make something worthwhile out of it. Zielman has made his mark with a number of ponds here in the area, so I thought of offering this plot. I spoke to Mr. Berthold and that's how things went. You can't take it with you, so better leave it in the right hands. That was the thinking.
But in the endless expanses of agrarian countryside, small oases created with diggers and spades can only be part of the answer. Where everything is so organized and neat, animal volunteers can offer a little creative chaos. In the canton of Thurgau, On the Swiss shore of Lake Constance, researchers have released beavers. They've taken on the job of remodeling former carp ponds. There are now several beaver families, which biologist Philip Taxberg can watch during their daily labours. No one knows better than a hungry beaver what needs to be done here. The damage he's doing is just what's wanted.
For centuries, we've robbed nature of the dynamics of the floodplain. Beavers can bring part of that back through building dams. That results in flooded areas, standing water in places, pools drying up, streams being diverted, and so on. Beavers bring back these dynamics.
The beavers create new habitats not just for themselves, but for many other animals and plants, which are dependent on dammed watercourses. Wetlands are vital biotopes for amphibians and reptiles. Many species of fish have also found a new home in the former carp ponds. Where once only carp splashed about, tench are now also swimming and searching for food in the mud. Life above water has also gathered pace. Broad-winged damselflies are in mating mood. The beavers have done a good job. But even here, nature needs support from people. In charge of the Lengwieler pond is biologist Markus Bürgisser. He keeps his eye on the animals and intervenes when necessary. 2 threatened species of bird have settled in this new oasis. Markus Bürgisser and his colleagues originally wanted rare common tern to breed here on rafts. But the biologists hadn't reckoned with another species asserting itself on the lake. Black-headed gulls are further on in their development than their neighbours, even though this chick would have drowned without Marcus's visit. But the gulls threaten to take over, because the 2 species compete for the same nesting places. Without human intervention once again, it wouldn't have ended well for the common tern in the long run.
These
breeding rafts, the big ones, were made for the common terns. They're a redless species, an endangered species. Over time, more and more black-headed gulls arrived and displaced the terns. Of course, the gulls are also endangered here as a breeding bird. So we had 2 rare types of bird, with one slowly forcing the other out. And that was something of a problem.
The answer? Breeding rafts for both species at the right time.
Jetzt machen wir es so. Wir bauen neue Flosse für die Lachmöwen.
Now, we've built new rafts for the gulls. They breed earlier than the common terns, because the terns only come from Africa around the beginning of May. They take the rafts in the middle and can breed there undisturbed, because the gulls are already breeding on the small rafts.
Sometimes you have to be imaginative to help species protection succeed. In such confined spaces, just leaving things to their own devices can be misguided. It's not just the birds that are being given a helping hand at Lake Constance. Conservationists are now also looking at the lake itself. Lake Constance used to be a fishing paradise with rich breeding grounds. For the last 20 years, though, ever fewer fish are landing in the nets. There are still plenty of fish like this freshwater bream, but without human intervention, a particularly sought-after species that often used to be caught here would probably have already died out. For a long time, researchers were puzzled as to why this species had become so rare. It's only in recent years that they've tracked down the reason for the disappearance. The waters flowing into Lake Constance play a decisive role. Biologists from the Hydra Institute in Constance have discovered that the fish that's become rare needs intact inflowing waters for breeding. It's the brown trout. What distinguishes it is that, like the salmon, it migrates upstream to spawn. Is that still possible at Lake Constance? The researchers are systematically examining the inflowing waterways.
Now the depth, please.
21 centimeters,
Flow rate?
around 30 centimeters a second.
The measurements show that the water level of many inflows is too low for migrating to spawning grounds higher up. The fallen level has made rocks an insurmountable obstacle. Brown trout simply can't overcome this underwater range. Poor prospects for the offspring the fishermen on Lake Constance so eagerly await. But in 2010, at least one community cleared away the obstacles. In the lower reaches of the Goldach, a rock bar was removed so that the trout could continue their migration here. But it's not just rock outcrops that block the trout's progress. It's often man-made dams that prevent the fish from reaching their spawning waters. On the Goldach, at least, researchers Peter Rai and John Hesselschwert can now hope to see young brown trout once again. 1 to 2 years after spawning in the upper reaches, the young fish migrate downriver to Lake Constance. It's not enough, though, to remove obstacles. Eckhard Dosso is head of the Langenhagen Fish Hatchery.
Hello. Hello.
He has brought several thousand young brown trout, which he's raised in a breeding tank. Now they're to be released into the wild.
Right, let's get going.
As long as they're still young, brown trout accept a new stretch of water as their rearing ground. It's probably the distinctive smell of the stream that will later lead them back here for spawning. Eckhard Dosso hopes that releasing the fish will help get the natural cycle moving again, to the benefit of both humans and animals. But for brown trout to have a future in Lake Constance, a lot more clean and passable inflows will be needed. Here again, it's clear that wherever humans pave the way for wild animals, they come back almost by themselves. That's an insight that was actually first implemented at a small pond 15 years ago. "15 years later, Peter Berthold continues tirelessly to fight for more and more new habitats for wildlife. Here, a new pond has just been finished. As soon as the seeds grow, everyone will immediately see that another oasis has been created in the agricultural desert. A new pond here, not far from a renaturalized clay pit. A number of meadow orchards throughout the region. In just 15 years, it's been possible to create wildlife-friendly biotopes like these at 36 locations around Lake Constance. But Peter Berthold is a scientist and insists on hard facts. Only close monitoring will show whether birds are really settling in their new habitats and breeding. The Eurasian nuthatch's mating give him hope. The ruddy shell ducks are also in mating mood at the new pond. The swans have already made a nursery in the reeds. Every breeding bird is a gain for the future, for a world with more birds, with more biodiversity, and beauties like the great crested grebe. Eurasian coots show that every mini biotope can provide a home for wildlife. But some bird species need more than nesting places, reed beds, and clean water if they are to return. These odd-looking characters are northern bald ibises, which have been wiped out in Central Europe since the 17th century. These come from Austrian zoos. The 33 birds were hand-reared by ornithologists, and since then follow them around wherever they go. Led by powered hang gliders, they're here to learn how real migratory birds behave. Their ancestors were able to find their own way to the wintering areas beyond the Alps. But birds reared in human keeping need guidance. Today's flight is to a landing strip about 20 kilometers away. Step by step, the researchers are approaching their goal of crossing the Alps with the ibises. Soon, the migratory birds should be able to make it as far as Tuscany. Peter Berthold has supported the project from the outset. The birds have absolute trust in their human foster mothers. Once the birds have memorized the route over the Alps, they'll be able to find their own way back to Lake Constance independently. The relationship between humans and ibises is a short-lived love story.
We've spent every day with the birds since we took them from the nest, and we're always there for them. If there's danger, we're there to show them what is and isn't dangerous, like our aircraft. In return, the birds place so much trust in us that they're really willing to fly with the aircraft. It's far from normal for birds to fly close to an aircraft, but they do so simply to be able to fly with us.
So, jawohl, hallo, wunderbar, ganz
Haben Sie es beobachten können beim
einmalig, schön.
It was Peter Berthold's suggestion to start the project from Lake Constance.
Sowas zu sehen, dass das möglich ist, dass man so mal.
Just imagine that a species that was literally devoured, because that's why they disappeared, can be resuscitated from cooking pot, as it were. That's something that touches the heart and soul, and can even convert the diehard to conservation.
Begeisterung zu sagen, so, jetzt bin ich wieder für Naturschutz, ne? Da kann man auch was tun für solche Vögel, von denen man nachher immerhin.
If these northern bald ibises become genuine migratory birds again, they will create a bond between people, even of different countries.
Since 2014, we have also been a European Life Project, a status recognized and financed by Europe, which enables us to implement the project and gives it a high probability of succeeding.
Gut, so machen wir weiter. Ne?
Good, that's what we'll do. Have a good return flight. All the best.
Alles Gute. Ja. Gut.
When the ibises will return as migratory birds is not yet sure. What is sure is that living conditions for many bird species have improved at Lake Constance. What began in 2005 with a pond in Berthold's own community was the attempt to give wildlife a new chance. Only regular bird counts will show which rare and endangered species have really found their way back. Before any talk of success, the scientist needs the figures. Shortly after sunrise, he sets up his nets at the Heinz Zielmann pond. They're invisible to birds. Now it's an exercise in patience. Carefully, gently, the bird expert releases the animals from the net. This young robin is in good shape and will soon be released again. Not every bird that Peter Berthold frees from the net is rare, but the stock of even the widely found great tit has declined in Germany. So every single sighting is important. One surprise is the return of a species that has become rare. Peter Berthold has not seen a reed warbler here for decades. The blackbird is thought of as a commonplace bird, but in recent years, tens of thousands of them have succumbed to a virus. The increasingly rare yellowhammer needs hedges and bushes for refuge. And the willow warbler needs the spiders and insects it finds on leaves and branches. Year by year, Peter Berthold takes stock of how many bird species have now settled in the new biotopes.
Did you hear? It's not just a man-made oasis, it's a man-made paradise. Just a few figures. In this area, before we set up this Heinz-Seelmann pond biotope, with its neighbouring bushes, wetlands and buffalo pasture, we'd recorded around 115 bird species over 30 years. That slowly dropped to 101. Then we built the pond and the wetland, and 23 new species arrived in the first year. Now we've reached 181 and are approaching 200.
The newer biotopes still need time to develop. But if things carry on the way they are doing, half of all bird species that have disappeared could soon have returned to the region. A major success that shows how the natural world can still find a place in this cultivated landscape. Peter Berthold, though, thinks he and his partners have only just begun. Following the Lake Constance projects, the plan is to push on further, beyond national borders.
We'll be able to do a lot, partly into Switzerland and then heading towards the North Sea. Our plan for the near future is to create one in every district. That's around 10,000 altogether.
10,000 biotopes to combat species decline. An ambitious plan. And an achievable plan if towns, districts, farmers and animal lovers work together. In Germany alone, over half the land is intensively farmed. Everywhere from the Alps to the Baltic, new habitats for wildlife are urgently needed. The initiatives by the conservationists of Lake Constance have shown that birds and other wildlife can be saved. It's not yet too late. humans can give back to nature something of what they've taken from it.
So, also, zum Wohl. Auf die nächsten
Cheers to the next good sailman years. I'll manage 20 and you'll nail another 50.
At least.